Okay. All right. The audio should be working. I'm going to double check this. Hold on, folks. All right. It seems to be working. So let's dive into this. In the name of God, the most benevolent and the most merciful and the most advanced, in honor of the original unconditional moment that all conditional moments have arisen from and will return to, in honor of the world host and the system admin beyond this world room and existential system. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode. Tonight's episode is an interesting one. I have talked about this concept and this topic many times, and I find myself talking about it again. It is very important, and especially if you're a futurist, it's one of the joys of fathoming the future. March of all humanity towards the supranationalistic era. Could have also said transnationalistic, post-nationalistic. And in this lecture, my focus is more on what is inside existence than outside of it. And I understand that even though we cannot explain why existence exists in the same way that we're in a box, what's in the box cannot explain what's outside of the box. Yet our human lives have a value more than just to ourselves. Every human being has a value to their species. And so we're reaching that time in human history where slowly but surely the species is moving towards the realization that nationalism is a smaller game than, in some sense, what the tasks of a united species are. And so, yes, this is one of those talks about what will happen if we're united. So, I'm going to start from the research component. I've provided a research component throughout the years of my lectures. The research component, there was a time where it was code tunnels, different articles. But now in 2026, we have AI and I have ChatGPT 5.2, and I've given my title, the title for this lecture, and asked it to share different views. So first, it's the academic view. Excuse me. So I'm reading this, the academic view. When we examine the march of humanity toward what we might call the transnationalist era, that's, guys, I wrote it as transnationalist first. When we examine the march of humanity toward what we might call the transnationalist era, we must resist the temptation to romanticize it. From an academic standpoint, this should be idealism, but by structural necessity. Political systems evolve in response to scale. Tribal governance worked at the scale of dozens. Cities governed thousands. Empires governed millions. Nation states coordinated tens or hundreds of millions. But today, the scale of our challenges is planetary. Climate systems do not recognize borders. Artificial intelligence models operate across jurisdictions. Supply chains span continents. Pathogens travel globally in hours. Financial markets react in milliseconds across time zones. The nation state remains powerful, but it is no longer sufficient. In international relations theory, scholars describe this transition through concepts such as regime complexity, institutional layering, and pooled sovereignty. What this means in simpler terms is that the states increasingly create shared rules and institutions because acting alone is too costly. They form treaties, regulatory bodies, verification agencies, and dispute resolution courts. Over time, these layered institutions begin to resemble something larger than mere cooperation. They begin to form an architecture of global governance. A United Species Council, in this academic view, would not suddenly replace nations. Rather, it would emerge gradually from accumulated delegations of authority. First, issue-specific councils, climate councils, AI governance boards, biosecurity alliances. Then stronger enforcement tools, monitoring systems, compliance incentives, economic penalties for defection. Eventually, legitimacy mechanisms, representation structures, transparency protocols, and formal charters. This is not world government in the cinematic sense. It is a structured escalation of coordination. The driving logic is cost-benefit rationality. When the cost of fragmentation exceeds the perceived cost of shared authority, states choose cooperation. Crises accelerate this process. Historically, global institutions strengthened after catastrophic wars. In the future, existential technologies or ecological tipping points may play the same catalytic role. Thus, the transnationalist era emerges not from utopian desire, but from institutional adaptation to planetary interdependence. A United Species Council, academically speaking, would be the endpoint of incremental governance scaling, a coordinating body designed to manage species level risks while preserving cultural and political diversity at lower levels. Human problems have become global, but our political systems are still mostly national. As global risks grow, countries will slowly give more authority to shared institutions because it becomes too expensive not to cooperate. A United Species Council would form gradually from these shared systems, not as a sudden world government, but as the logical next layer of coordination. Okay, so I gotta say something here. The word transnationalist compared to supranationalist. Supra means above, do you know? And in some sense, the prefix means above, and trans means across, and in some sense beyond in regards to crossing something, right? So from one angle, it's about the relationships that of nations with one another, and then it's about the relationship they all have beyond just being a nation. Okay. Now there was a huge point here. Okay, let me zoom in on that. It says the driving logic is cost benefit rationality. When the cost of fragmentation exceeds the perceived cost of shared authority, states choose cooperation. So what does this mean? This means there will come a time in the future where nationalism is going to feel limited. Okay, because what we're really seeing on this planet, guys, is it's one planet but divided invisibly. Okay, that means people are identifying with specific chunks of land. When will the species realize it is one species on Earth? And you're going to see, as I share my own views, my own view is that, of course, it's a bit ahead of its time, but what it is that we have a choice of identifying with the location of where we are, or we have a choice of identifying with what we are. I find it that in the future, there's going to be a united species ID everybody's going to get. You know what that means? That means you're a member of the human species, and part of being a member of this human species, this earth is in some sense free, should be accessible. That means in the far future, I envision that in some sense, airplanes and all of that's going to become free. People are going to be able to travel around the world in couples of hours free. What billionaires are experiencing now, it's going to become like, give it like, I don't know, maybe 100, 200 years or something. It's going to become for everybody. When I say billionaires, I mean, like I heard this thing that there's this billionaire that for lunch flies to Morocco, then flies to London for a meeting, then flies to somewhere else, all in like one day or something. You know, Okay, I think the audio might be easier to listen to. I changed the settings. Let me know if it's not as audible, I guess. All right. So, anyways, going back to this, the point of it was, folks, that there will come a time where the cost of, in some sense, just nations being nations, it's not going to be worth it compared to the species uniting. And in my own visions, it's one where right now the political process is the responsibility, let's say the politics of a nation is the responsibility of, let's say, just a minority of people in that nation. But in the future, I think with AI becoming more advanced, people are going to get way more directly involved in policies and whatnot. Right now, human beings, let's say in democratic countries, and of course, we need to consider democracy is just the majority vote. Okay, but right now, people are voting on which ego to, in some sense, lead them. Okay, in the future, we're going to vote on the policies specifically. I find. Anyways, now we go to the most advanced view. I'm reading this, the research component is a little bit long. Now let us go deeper. From a systems evolution perspective, now let us go deeper. From a systems evolution perspective, humanity is not merely forming institutions, it is undergoing a cognitive and structural metamorphosis. Every complex organism requires a coordination system. Cells formed multicellular organisms by developing signaling networks. Insects formed colonies by developing distributed intelligence. Humans formed nations by developing shared myths and bureaucratic systems. At each stage of evolution, survival depended on improving coordination at higher levels of integration. Human civilization today functions like a fragmented nervous system. We share one biosphere, one technological network, one atmospheric system, yet our decision making remains divided among competing sovereignties. This creates a mismatch between environmental complexity and governance capacity. In cybernetic terms, control systems must match the complexity of the system they regulate. When the environment becomes planetary, governance must become planetary. What a sentence. Exactly. When the environment becomes planetary, we become planetary conscious. We need, in some sense, conscious planetary governance. The transnationalist era then is not simply political integration. It is the emergence of species level self awareness. Digital networks already act as a proto-nervous system. Satellites observe Earth in real time. Global data flows allow shared situational awareness. Artificial intelligence enables modeling of planetary scale dynamics. What is missing is coherent species level decision authority. A united species council, in this advanced view, represents the formalization of humanity's collective intelligence. It would function as a planetary regulatory cortex, setting boundary conditions for survival, AI containment standards, bioengineering oversight, planetary resource budgets, existential risk thresholds. This shift is driven not by morality alone, but by evolutionary pressure. Civilizations facing converging existential risks must either coordinate at a higher level or collapse under internal competition. Nuclear weapons, synthetic biology, advanced AI, climate destabilization. These form a bottleneck. Passing through this bottleneck requires alignment at the species level. The deeper transformation, however, is identity. For a united species council to function, humans must partially re-anchor identity from nation to species. This does not eliminate nations, it layers above them. Just as being a citizen of a city does not negate being a citizen of a country, being part of humanity would become a primary axis of loyalty. The council is therefore not merely an institution, it is the structural expression of a new stage of collective consciousness. Humanity becomes aware of itself as a single adaptive system. When that awareness stabilizes, the council ceases to be a political experiment and becomes an evolutionary inevitability. Humanity is like a body without a unified brain. Our technology has connected us into one system, but our decisions are still divided. As risks become global and more powerful, we will need species-level coordination to survive. A united species council would act like a planetary nervous system, helping humanity think and act as one organism. This is very important. I think it was in sociology that Emil Durkheim suggested that we need to see like different parts of society, different institutions in society as like, different parts of a brain. Ladies and gentlemen, we cannot ignore that, lesser life forms unite into emerging as a bigger life form, and then that bigger life form becomes conscious and unites with other life forms of its own scale, and in some sense becomes a different scale of a life form. Okay? Now, aside from this, I asked AI to share advanced points of view that lead us there, okay? So I'm going to read this. It says, below are the main lenses. Each lens includes core idea, what it creates, and what to visualize. Excuse me. A, systems theory, the cybernetics lens. The idea is control must match complexity. This creates planetary feedback loops, which are measured, then decided, then acted on. Visually, Earth with sensors, dashboards, red lines, Earth with sensors plus dashboards. Red lines equal thresholds. The council adjusts dials. For example, emissions, biorisk, AI risk levels. B, evolutionary lens. The multi-level selection. The idea is groups that coordinate better survive. This creates larger cooperative units. We went from the tribe to the nation to the species. Visually nested circles expanding outward, coordination rings replacing conflict rings. That means human beings, they think conflict is cool now, but they're going to realize how much coordination is cooler, how much advancement is cooler. You don't understand, guys. You know, there's it's like thinking about what is the value of one soldier, okay, and what is the value of an army. And so we are the army of humanity, every human being that is alive. We are members of the human species. We are the human odyssey. You know, and you have to make a choice. You were conditioned, you know, back in the day they identified with tribes. Now we identify with nations. Mr. Within and all the futurists are telling you, identify on a species level. We need the responsibility level of the individual to shift. That means people, they in some sense serve their nation. Well done. Your responsibility level was way higher than all those people who just served themselves. You understand? However, now we need a higher responsibility level. We want to serve the species on Earth. Granted, even though Earth is the name we've given it, but we need to work with what we have. And then we go to C. It says network lens. Internet as nervous system. The internet is like a nervous system. It says the idea is connectivity produces a de facto global organism. This creates fast shared awareness plus rapid mobilization. Visually, neural network overlay on Earth, information pulses, emergency signals routed to response hubs. That would be very cool. In a united species, there's going to be response hubs everywhere. The moment there's any issue anywhere on the planet, all the hubs are conscious. You know, everybody responds. That means, think of it this way. Why do human beings in history, why have they united? Do you understand? There has been an advantage to it. You know, our ability to step out of the food chain, guys, this is me saying this now. Our ability to get out of the food chain was simply because of shared meaning. Human beings understood they were all humans. They understood they had all the same goal. They all sharpened spears, and like 100 humans surrounded a mammoth, hunted a mammoth, and they had food for like a year or something. So it's that ability of shared meaning. And in the future, you know, think of it this way, that you know, why do people get married? Why do they start families? Why do they have children? It is in some sense in some sense, the weight of the world distributed, the weight of how reality engages them distributed, not just among themselves. This is why, you know, lone wolves and I guess, you know, rogue souls are, I think they're close to they are guided by divinity to some degree, you know, because the pressures of reality is all alone on them, you know. But the whole idea is that we cannot just live for ourselves anymore. Okay, we cannot just live for our family anymore. We cannot just live for our neighborhoods and communities anymore. We cannot just live for our nations anymore. It is now time to live for our species, to care for the species before culture separates us, and before culture dehumanizes us to each other. You know, we must realize the human species is the most important, one of the most important values in this world. That means don't be, before you are convinced by people as your impressions, realize they are members of your species. It's identifying on a species level. That is huge for civilizational, update. We go to D. I'm going to go back to the research component. Risk convergence, existential bottleneck lens. The idea is some risks are civilization ending. They force unity. This creates global safety regimes, AI, bio, nuclear. Visually, three giant gates labeled AI, bio, nuclear. Humanity must build one set of keys, shared rules to pass. Then we go to E, geoeconomics lens, supply chains. The idea is production is transnational. Control shifts to standards. This creates governance by certification, logistics access, and market entry rules. Visually, excuse me, what was I reading? Oh yeah, visually shipping routes and data cables, standard passports, decide who can trade. Excuse me, it says standards passports, like standards plural, decide who can trade. You know, I have often thought that the biggest issue with capitalism is the quality. Things, they reduce the quality of the product to create more of the product, to sell more of the product. But you know, what sort of species do we want to be? Do we want to be humans that are using low quality things when we have the capability of higher quality? You know, think of it this way: you see a YouTube video on low resolution, you can see YouTube videos on higher resolution. You know, so similarly, what is that higher resolution life on this in this world for us, for all of us? And to me, you know, we got to start thinking like, what would my species do? Not just what would I do, what would my family do, what would my neighborhood do, what would my community do, what would my nation do? No, what would my species do? And then slowly we go towards a sort of celestial era of man. You know, I saw this in my inner realms. I got a vision. These are just probabilities I'm sharing, but I got a vision that in the future, everybody is going to, their names are going to be based on stars in the future. You don't understand. Even it's all going to change to some degree. You know, as it's like right now we are too occupied by what's going on in humanity. Okay, as I read earlier, it said that it's like right now all the nations, all the different people, this is like one organism, right? But it hasn't realized it's one organism. It's like it doesn't have one body. Okay, so it's like one nation. You know, people look at it, they think that no, one religion is more important than the other religion, one ideology is more important than the other ideology. They don't realize it's an ecosystem. When you go to a garden, okay, and imagine you're someone, I mean, this goes for anybody who's any, like, if uh us or is is, you know what I mean by that is, if you're religious, do you know, or whatever you are, do you know, whatever ideology you identify with, do you know, all of these are just the lack of awareness that, like, think of it as a garden, guys. Okay, when you go see a garden with so many different flowers in it, do you just go, no? Like, I'm saying this to all religious people, to the Muslims, to the Christians, you know, to the Jews, to the Buddhists, you know, to the Hindus, to everybody. Okay, everybody who's right now in one chunk of the world identifying with the specificity of that. Okay, just think of it this way. You know, if somebody says no, only this view is correct, it's like they're going to a garden and plucking out all the flowers that are not the flower they identify with. It is a shame. The garden intentionally has brought forth all these different positions, not for them to be endlessly caught in a sort of ignorant civil war, but to, in some sense, unite to appreciate the garden's presence beyond the specifics of what sort of flowers are there in that garden. Okay, and the garden of existence is way important, way more important than just the garden of ideology, to be honest. We go to, it says F, law and legitimacy lens. The idea is power becomes stable when perceived as fair. This creates courts, charters, human rights floors, due process. It's visually, it would be a constitution layer hovering above nations. Individuals can appeal beyond their state. Exactly, that's what's missing. We go to AI governance lens. Idea, super systems require aligned controllers. This creates licensing for frontier AI, compute oversight, model evaluations, visually in brackets, compute choke points as guarded gateways, licenses like nuclear facility permits. Then we go to biosecurity lens. The idea, this is I, so it says I, biosecurity lens. Idea, engineered pathogens make borders meaningless. This creates lab standards, global surveillance, rapid response protocols. Visually, biosensors like smoke detectors worldwide, outbreak equals automatic global containment playbook. And then we go to J, climate and planetary boundaries lens. The idea is Earth has had limits, overshoot collapses stability. This creates binding budgets, carbon, biodiversity, water. Visually, in quotations, planetary budget ledger. The council balances. Then we go to K, identity evolution lens, in brackets, species narrative. The idea is institutions follow identity, loyalty must scale. This creates, in quotation, species first, civil religion, culture without erasing diversity. Visually, passports still exist, but a humanity ID sits above them. Exactly. Called that the United Species ID, sits above them. Shared rituals for planetary stewardship. The stewards of the planet. Those are among the advanced, the most advanced. Then we go to L, it says crisis learning lens. In brackets, history pattern. The idea is integration accelerates after shocks. This creates new institutions after near collapse. Visually, imagine a timeline. World War I led to the LON. World War II led to the UN. The future, something in the future which will shock us, will lead to the Species Council, United Species Council. What was the LON? Just give me a sec. League of Nations, yeah, the League of Nations. So the League of Nations got developed after World War I. United Nations got developed after World War II. And something in the future, let's not hope it's a world war, but it's going to lead to the United Species Council. For me, I personally think that, there's going to be a natural event that's going to freak us out. Okay. I don't think it's going to be like a meteor hitting Earth, even though they said by 2029 some rock is going to get close to Earth or whatever. But I think it's going to be a climate thing. I read somewhere, it said there's about, I don't know if it was I think it was 500 million units of CO2 or something. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. Like, that's left in the atmosphere that we can release. If we release more, it increases the temperature of everything by 1.5 degrees. That's like not good, But if it goes above 1.5, that might lead to systems failure. If it goes to 2, that's going to be like tragedy, you know? So we need to realize it's not enough just to live, under the rock of your nation, thinking that you're just living in accordance to your culture and all of this is fine. It is now, we're reaching that time where we need to become responsible for all the predicaments that are going to approach the whole species in the future. Do you understand? We as humanity, it's like in the same way you look at someone. Let's say I'm not a parent, but I'm sure parents look at their kids and they're like, this kid's got potential, but he's not using his potential, right? In the same way, you got it. There will come a point where you're going to be like, wait a minute, what is this potential of my species? Why isn't it activating its potential? Right? And then you're going to feel the greater callings beyond nationalistic and specific local cultural paradigms. You understand? That means it is now time to truly be human beings, and truly care for all humanity on earth. Where else, when else can you do this? You have one lifetime to serve. So guys, that's the end of the research component. Now I'm going to go into my views. I'm going to tell you how, in this moment at least, a sort of journey I've been on. Okay. In 2014, when these lectures were born, before I started them, I was in my room in this accommodation area. At the time, I was studying mechanical engineering. Granted, it became unsuccessful because I was legit like a machine, just cranking out talks all the time. But the sentence 10,000 talks for the betterment of mankind, okay, arose to me with the name Mr. Within's gift. And it was as if that unique moment where I felt like, yo, am I the first human being considering this name? And I feel I am. Now, I would go sit on a bench, press the record button, on my iPhone 3 with fake iPhone headphones that I bought from a store, and I would record. As the years passed, ideas began emerging in these lectures of mine that had an influence on me, okay? And it suddenly went from, I don't know how to say it, but there came a moment in my life where the word advanced had a glow, okay? And I began wondering about the word advanced could be put in front of everything. You think of like a car, what would an advanced car be? You think of a building, what would an advanced building be? And the answer to those two is a spaceship, by the way. Both of them lead to a spaceship. But then my answer came, what is an advanced human? And then suddenly this insight arose to me, and these terms came to me, the advanced communicators. I saw them in my inner realms. These human beings that will be born in the future, that they will be accompanying every, let's say, public servant of civilization. That means police officers, firemen, paramedics. There will be an advanced communicator accompanying them. And these advanced communicators are there to be able to discriminate between the inner realms and outer realms of human beings. Because the biggest problem is, for example, we see it in regards to, let's say, there was African-American population that was like, okay, there's police brutality and all of this. Okay, but if there was an advanced communicator there, okay, and the advanced communicator would suddenly realize that maybe the police officer and maybe the person miscommunicated. Or maybe the paramedic and the person miscommunicated, or the fireman and the other person miscommunicated. Okay, and so the advanced communicator would be there to be able to realize and is there to help preserve the inner realms of human beings, because a person may have such an arrogance and ego, and they might not even realize it, that they might be like, nah man, I'm right and this person has to listen to me. And even though if the person is right, they do not know what sort of intensity that person can confront behind their eyes. There's different intensities, you know. A child sees the same world as a 5-year-old kid sees the same world as a 50-year-old man. Okay, but the intensity of events that take place due to the lack of understanding and lack of awareness, it is heavier for the child. Do you understand? So there are pressures, and everybody is living a hidden life behind their eyes. You know, people can come up to me till the end of time. You know, bring a coliseum of professors. You know, of university professors, and they'll all be like, "Yo, Mr. Within, you know, I am this body. I am what these subjects I'm telling you." And I'll be like, "No, you're not." And then I'll shout, "Are you not entertained?" You know. And so my point of it is that we need to start caring for human intelligence prior to the solidification of that human in accordance to our impressions and limited views. The understanding will be that nobody sees enough, okay, to in some sense be 100% certain. Okay, and I'm talking about this in the sense of we as human beings are in an incomplete system because our completion is based on our limited human identity. The human identity is limited. We are humanizing everything. When humans get pets, they give it a name. They say, "Come here, boy, come here, girl." They start talking to the animal. Do you understand? They are humanizing that lower species. And I'm not saying it's wrong, but I'm saying that it's not just pets, it's everything else, folks. And people are going to be like, "Yeah, Mr. Within, but what else can we do? We're humans." And I'll be like, "Yes, but we're not just humans. We are also an awareness to every human idea we have had and its counter." What is greatness? People think greatness is like, "Yo, man, I did something cool and people cheered." No, greatness is responsibility for the furthest reaches of the awareness of our species. Responsibility is very key. It's what separates many human beings from one another, like youth and adulthood. Okay, it's what separates the immature with the mature. Okay, why? That means an image. Think of it this way: the 5-year-old kid, you know, it's like, you know, just playing. The parents are like, "Son, go play." You know, the kid's like, "All right, dad," and the kid goes and plays. Okay, but the difference is the kid is in a reality. The kid is not paying bills. The kid is not paying taxes. The kid is not aware of different things. You know, in some sense, the kid is not creating an emergency fund for itself. Do you understand? That kid is preoccupied and is not it's responsible for itself. Do you understand? But as you grow older, you begin to see you are aware beyond yourself. You're aware of more than yourself. The difference is the word responsibility always sounds like responsibility, your ability to respond. The ability of a 5-year-old to respond to this world is still limited to its personal inner realms. But that 50-year-old man who has seen the world, and the way intelligence develops is primarily right now pattern recognition. Just like somebody who was like, "Yo, man, are these chess grandmasters all geniuses?" No, they've just have such repeated pattern recognition. Such the patterns they've recognized have repeated so many times that when they look at the chessboard, they are seeing all those patterns. It's just there instantaneously. You know, to the degree that they even memorize the chessboard. You know, I saw two chess players. I think it was Hikaru and Magnus. I think they were like, in their minds they were playing. They don't technically need the board to be there, you know. So think of it this way. Humans are born, these beings that emerge, okay, in an ecosystem. Beings are usually in ecosystems, except unconditional beings. We're conditional beings. So think of it this way: beings emerge, they become aware of their ecosystem. They have a then, in some sense, if they identify with something, they can have relationships with their ecosystem. And identity just doesn't have to be with your memories and feelings. It could also be with a role, with an archetypal role. So they become aware of the ecosystem, and then to survive is to respond to what's happening, to your awareness, to what you find in your awareness. For example, me as a human being, you are seeing this lecture is how I am responding at the end of the day to everything I've been made aware of. Okay? I'm just taking responsibility. I'm not at a position where I can live on a species level, which was, it's one of my biggest dreams. Do you know? Like, I don't know, for the longest time I've had this vision of myself that I'm like at the frontiers of global decision making, but not in politics. It's weird. I don't know. Maybe I'm seeing it in a parallel reality in my mind. Do you know? And in some sense, in civilizational design, I've said in these talks, I find myself to have the soul of a designer. Do you know? And I feel like civilizational design is the highest. It's the most advanced work. And because I'm not like I'm some I'm positioned, in a I'm not that, I don't know, the way the system as admin has brought me forth has not been at that scale. Like I'm not a child of a politician. I'm not a child of, like, a world leader or something, to be able to realize how many ideas, how many things can be updated and advanced. You know what I mean? I'm just some dude in Toronto, Canada, just recording a podcast in his car, you know. But a part of me understands. I see it, that it's all heading towards that species level responsibility. Okay. Now, in my, let me see where I can take this. Think of it this way. Right now, humans are they are personalizing reality. If somebody asked me, or let me make it playful. Imagine I'm a sci-fi writer, so I'll make this like like that. Imagine I was, walking my invisible cat with an invisible leash, in a park, do you know, in a sky city park, sky city like a kilometer above the air, and in a park on that, I'm like, walking my invisible cat with an invisible leash, you know, and suddenly imagine these extraterrestrials land in that park, and they're like, yo dude, do you know what's going on here, do you know? And they ask me, what do you think is the biggest problem of your species? I mean, that's going to be in the future, so those problems might not be there. I should have probably given an example from the present. But let's say I'm in the park, I'm just, walking in the park now in 2026, and extraterrestrials land. Okay, and they're like, yo bro, you seem to talk a lot, you seem to be attentive, what do you think the biggest problem of the species is? The way I would explain it, which I have many times, but to explain it I guess anew here, it's all about the human agency, the human being personalizing reality, and thinking that responsibility means what is only personally real. Okay. We human beings are positioned with what I term as the outer realms and the inner realms. The outer realms is the world you find in front of your eyes. It is an objective, existential public server. You are a physical entity alongside with all other physical entities, in this realm. You're all in the same map. Think of it like an MMO, multiplayer online game. Okay, every day we wake up, we log in. Yo, man, I'm this character again. And the character is in the same server, same map as all the other characters. But what is a character in a video game? A character in a video game, let's say, assumes like, do I have a soul? That character becomes conscious. It will realize that what it actually is moving that character in a way that it may never understand inside that pixelated server, okay, is another three-dimensional being, okay, rather than on a 2D pixelated screen. Do you know? There's a person sitting outside of that screen, playing the video game. That is the inner realms. So every human being you see has an inner realms. Now the inner realms I define it as a private subjective server. Okay, in front of your eyes, you're in a public objective server. And the way human beings have been living is that what they find real what they have accumulated and real, and all the, let's say, brain patterns recognized, that's their personal inner realm, right? So from their inner realm subjectivity, they overlay these subjects on the outer realms. Okay, that's why suddenly two people look at the Mona Lisa in the Louvre art gallery, and one of them's like, yo, she ain't smiling, and the other one's like, yo, she's definitely smiling, because each of them have a private, personal, subjective, arisen meaning. So we need to understand. So if those extraterrestrials ask me, for example, this hypothetical, futuristic, if they ask me, yo, what's the biggest problem of the human species? I'll be like, this inability to discriminate between what is present in your inner realms and what is actually present in the outer realms. And if you can't discriminate with these, it's like a bird that is not flapping its wings at the same time. It's like its right wing is flapping faster than its left wing, or its outer realms are flapping faster than its inner realms. Do you understand? So what do I mean? It's the personalization. They personalize things. I'll tell you this. Imagine you're sitting somewhere, somebody walks up to you and it's like, yo, man, I heard one thing you said, and in my view, you're a terrible person. Or imagine they come and say, oh my God, you said something very nice. You're an incredible person. Okay. Now, what does that mean? That means that they saw one instance. They saw one expression of a being even. Do you know? And then from their inner realms, they personalized who that person was to themselves. Let me tell you this, guys. This life, as you grow older in it, especially to the younger folks, to the younger souls in this realm, when you take things personally, you get pushed into your inner realms. Then in your inner realms, only your personal meaning is real. You become an egotistical entity. And when you try to force your inner realms on the outer realms, it in some sense deflects. And people are like, yo, why am I unlucky? I was like, why is this happening to me? They don't understand that it's like you're taking the meaning of a private reality, overlaying it on a public reality, and thinking that the private reality has to be absolute in the public reality. In other words, it's an enforcement of the inner realms and the outer realms. But if a person, let's say person A is sitting somewhere, person B comes and says something, let's say nonsense, says something negative to person A can just personalize it. They could be like, yo, they're saying this to me specifically, this guy's judging me, Okay. Or they can realize it's impersonal and that other person doesn't know the way you are subjectively experiencing your life. So when you realize that this system admin of this, the world host of this world room has designed this, the system admin has designed this existential system to be experienced in two ways. Granted, you're existing in one way. Let's throw a bone for the materialists, but at the same time, the experience of existence is not singular. There is an inner realm, there's an outer realm. When we experience existence, it is not existential. But if we wonder about the existence of experience, that could just be it's just existing. So taking reality personally, how does this fit into the notion of supranationalism, post-nationalism, transnationalism, the United Species Council? It simply suggests that if our personal reality is more important than the impersonal reality which we're all existing in, if our experience of existence is more important than the existence, we might ignorantly destroy our existence. In other words, to take something personal is to limit that reality to your own meaning, your own reality. It is not ideal. And so, they even say there's something they say in philosophy, in some sense, that even ethics is local. And what is ethics? It leads to morality, the sense of what is right, what is wrong. And that's very local. And we need to go further and further in realizing that we need a universal ethics, planetary ethics. To me, it's like, think of it this way. Human beings have boxes on their head and they don't realize that they're just living in that box, and the world is far more larger, unknown. It is a colossal unknown event. Adaption is just having a relationship with an unknown world, with an unknown event, you know. So to take things personally is to shrink the world. And the issue is when somebody is rude to you or nice to you, they say, don't let it get to your head. What they mean is that it doesn't have to be personal. When a person, like, that means that when I'm communicating right now, I don't know, for some people, the words I'm saying might just be, you might just be seeing the words in their inner realms, or you might be seeing images. I see images. Okay. And I am telling you that, let's say I come and say you're a terrible listener. That creates an image in your mind. Okay. And when that image is there, you have a choice to identify with that image or not. You can think Like, see, this is why people get angry, because they are identifying with the image in view in their inner realms. Okay, when that image changes, they're like, yo, I'm not this image. They get angry. Do you understand? But you gotta be able to discriminate, okay, and realize that communication travels through your ears and in your inner realms appears as an internal event. Okay, appears as an inner event. Now, that inner event can be personalized. You can think that inner event is you, and especially young children. Why is it so important how parents talk to young children? Do you know? Because in some sense, they still can't discriminate. They don't know who they are, so they think whatever is told about them is them, right? And a lot of trauma comes from this. There's so many different ways children are getting trauma on a physical level, on a subjective ideological level, even on an emotional level. That trauma means that they weren't established in their own identity before something happened. How does that identity get established? Ultimately, it's a decision based on what's real to you. I was one of those kids where, I thought for the longest time, like, yo, man, how do people have a lot to say? Why is it that it's like I don't have a personality? Like, honestly, when I was younger, I had this feeling. I'm like, yo, man, how can I even be myself? I'm just looking. I'm just like this sight in a room. Like that's. And then I realized its responsibility. The reason I did not establish myself, my own personality, because some trauma had convinced me that it is not okay to be yourself. Or I tried to be myself, I got embarrassed or people were rude or something. And, and if I was like, okay, I shouldn't be myself. Something, I don't know, something personally for me, but for me, it was more emotional enmeshment because I clarified things for myself later on. And the idea is once you bring consciousness to a process in your psyche that has been, let's say, subconsciously or unconsciously happening, then you can have to some degree control over it. Things you don't have control over, the brain sometimes puts aside in the subconscious, and they're still affecting you. This is where the ideas of self-sabotage, for example, comes in psychology. The person's like, in their youth, they didn't feel they deserve love, right? Then they go into a great relationship. That person's like loving them. And suddenly they don't know why. They ruin the relationship and get out of it. And people are like, why did you do that? She was so good for you, And then he's like, I don't know, man. It's like even the person doesn't understand. Why? Because it's a subconscious, unconscious protocol that the brain used to, in some sense, feel safe. And now, where it didn't feel safe, instead of realizing it's a new moment, it implemented that past protocol. You know? And remember, guys, Carl Jung has this very famous quote where he says, if unless you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. This is huge. This is huge because people think they're consciously living. Just because you're conscious to a part of life doesn't mean you're consciously living. You need to become aware of, in some sense, what is subconsciously affecting you. There was this very interesting view. It led to, the whole law of attraction movement. Okay. And all of that began because people started realizing that the brain doesn't treat itself as a person, but the consciousness to the brain does. What does that mean? That means the brain hears it just neutrally. That means if somebody, this is why they say don't negatively speak about yourself. Even I'm telling you, even if you want to bond with people, imagine somebody comes and says, yo, man, I got fired today. I don't like my job. And you might suddenly be like, no, yeah, man, I hate my job too. Don't ever do that. Don't ever, vocalize against yourself. All those people who say I'm not lucky or whatnot, they don't understand what they're doing. Do you understand? What they are giving an instruction to their subconscious, which is not identified. It's not an individual. It's machine-like. You understand? I'm not. My father, very early on, he made it clear to me that, hypnosis and all of that is nonsense, you know, not in the sense that it doesn't work, but in the sense that it's ignorance. Okay. And later on, you see it in even ancient traditions, right? That the whole point of it is that you, at least when you are conscious, and you have free will, it's important to be responsible for that agency. Okay. There is subtler differences between like channeling, the darker idea of possession, and then just a person noticing rhythms in their inner realms. There's a difference between these. It's all about what becomes the agency. Possession is like you're no longer the agency that's moving you. Do you know what I mean? Channeling is you are the agency, but there's another agency moving you. Do you understand? And noticing rhythms is no, you are the agency, just like how you would go and see a waterfall or a river. You're noticing rhythms in your inner realms, whether they come across to you through language or whether they come across to you through images. For me, when I was much younger, it was linguistic, and then at some point it became visual. And of course, all those capabilities are there, for human beings, because remembering is a visual act. But speaking, it sometimes it's like when a person speaks, or it's like, why do they read off things? Like when they're giving a speech, like you see those invisible prompters, like for politicians and whatnot. For me, it's all about realizing that if I want to live with species level responsibility, which is a unique opportunity, where else, when else can you experience the grand movement and power of a species? you know and we're all living on this planet being like, okay, we're not in charge, so let's live in these like nation camps. I shouldn't say it like that. We're living in nations. Okay, it's not wrong. And I'm not even in my talks, in my earlier talks of civilization 2.0, I spoke about like the next civilization, great grand effort of civilization. Okay, it doesn't mean nationalism has to go away. It just means all nations on the planet become sub nations. I've written this in my sci-fi of the nation of humanity. The human nation, the united species. That's what I'm talking about, okay? Right? I mean, like, for how long are we going to identify with chunks of land? When are we going to identify with the actual humans that we are? We are humanity. We're all dressed in the human uniform. You understand? And yet we're behaving as if we're not, we're fragmented. I truly, deep down in my heart, wonder about what is the might of the human species. When will the future generations realize that, they're maybe the older generations convince them that they're irresponsible, they're ignorant. And granted, there was the statistic that, like, a lot of children can't read, but it doesn't matter, folks. The nature of life is you climb towards the greater view. Okay. And the greater view is species level responsibility. And what is knowledge? Knowledge has a value in regards to application. You know, that's it, really. It's like, a person's knowledgeable, great, but do they apply the knowledge? No. Okay, so you need wisdom plus knowledge. Wisdom is to know when to apply the right knowledge. Okay, it's a matter of timing, really, wisdom or positioning. So, in my view, if we let me share some statistics here. Right now, let's say, even from a secular perspective, through the secular lens, um, civilization is considered a 300,000-year-old development. In that 300,000 years, it is estimated around 117 billion humans have existed. Okay. Currently, there's 8.1 billion humans, or of that 117 billion, are alive. What does that mean? 7% of humans that have ever existed are alive now. Okay. So right now, somebody may come and be rude to you, may disregard you, may make you feel inferior, and the test for you, the challenge for you is you shouldn't take it personally. Why? Because you are among, okay, still the natural human beings. You are an original, natural, biological human beings. And guys, if you were a futurist and in your inner realms, you were bored of the past and present, and your mind started charging towards all the probabilities of how the future could happen, you would begin to see that in the future, technology, probably most nanotechnology, it's going to make the appearance of, for example, androids, which are purely technological beings, indistinguishable from reality. Do you understand? That means when I say united species, I've given other talks on this, on this idea of the advanced civilization of mankind. But the whole idea is that we are the original class of human beings, and now I want you to imagine all natural human beings, biological beings have united. The next stage is, it doesn't mean an android or an advanced AI who's human, or imagine like an extraterrestrial, okay, a shape-shifting extraterrestrial, like actual alien immigration. I've written about this in my sci-fi. Aliens immigrate to Earth and they're living on Earth, and they have, what do you call it? They have, in some sense, shape-shifting abilities, and they look human. So in the future, we're going to see beings that look human but are not completely human. Okay, they are still members of humanity, but they are a different class of humanity. Okay, and the reason is to, in some sense, try to preserve the natural class. Okay. So think of it this way. Right now, people are occupied in 2026. It's the game of nation kind. Okay. In the future, it's going to be the game of mankind, humankind. Okay. Humans, right? Humanity, the game of humanity. After that, it's going to be the game of earth kind. That means you go further and further, you're going to see advanced AI connecting to animals. And in some sense, they don't have even, like, if it took them billions of years to develop a prefrontal cortex, okay, some animals, in some, it's not billions of years, millions of years to develop a prefrontal cortex, right? We will, in some sense, connect AI prefrontal cortexes to these animals, and they would be able to share their experiences, like a dog would be able to communicate, in ways that are not as limited to now. Do you know what I mean? Like in my sci-fi, in my science fiction, in The Messenger of Giants, the first book I wrote, in that, okay, there's a scene where in the Galactic United Council, I call it the Galactic Sector of the United Council. Like, I don't know, at that time I wrote it like that. I didn't have these words here now. And there's a cow with a red scarf that goes on the podium, and it's standing on its two legs, and it has some advanced AI connected to its brain. And it's giving a speech of how humans need to pay reparations for the millions or countless cows and beef sandwiches, or all this, all the times they ate animals, right? And humanity will be responsible, but it will be responsible in an appropriate way. Okay. Also, in my sci-fi, I created a character called Captain Fino, Fino, Captain Fino. Okay, and Captain Fino was this dolphin in like this robot suit, right? But it's like a dolphin in a capsule of water. Okay, in a glass capsule of water, but the capsule of water is in the suit of a robot. Okay, and it's the representative of all the animal class in the story. You know. Anyways, the point I'm trying to make is, as responsibility levels increase for the conscious human intelligence on Earth, we're going to, in some sense, other classes of beings are going to also be lifted up as humanity gets lifted up by the united presence of its own potential. Okay. For me personally, every day I wake up, these talks are, let me tell you why I think they have been very consistent in my life, is because like I don't know, I see it as a blessing that I found some way, to serve more than my own life. You know, it's such a, I don't know how to say it. I haven't even felt it, but in my inner realms, I can envision, the victories of a united species will be felt world over. There will be children singing the United Species anthem and then their nationalistic anthem, you know? So it's inevitable. The march of all humanity towards the transnationalistic, supranationalistic, post nationalistic era is inevitable. I'm going to maybe even align the, or no, I'll just say it. Start caring for the species. It's such an important feeling. I don't know about, other, I'm a man in this world, and I don't know about other men in this world, if how you guys have your sense of honor. Okay. I think most people have their sense of honor, and they're loyal to their future self. Okay. Everybody's kind of like living for their future self. But now it is time to live for that future world where all our future selves will be in, you know? In other words, I feel in 2026 there is something, an emotion, especially for men, that's missing. Okay, and it is a sense of honor for, I guess traditionally in medieval times it was honor for the empire, honor for the kingdom, but now it's the human empire. And I'm telling you, I feel that honor slightly when I give these talks. You know, as if I'm serving something that is greater than me, and God knows truly, but serving, it's the honor of serving the whole system. And this changes perspectives. A person, imagine they're a coffee barista, okay, or a hot dog stand owner by a Subway, you know, and they might be like, yo, man, why is my life, it's like, I don't like doing this, and they're looking at it through that context. But in the future, everything will be in some sense for the greatness of the advanced civilization. Everything is for that. Even indirectly, everything now being done is for that. We don't realize it. Okay. And it's that feeling of, okay, it is time to serve the whole species. That's the honor that's missing. That's what I meant. That's the honor that's missing. Okay, and a man without honor is in some sense like, an incomplete boy. You know, do you know what I mean? It's an incomplete man. It's like that honor for the greater event, to be engaged with that, the greater values of civilization. Do you know? More than just, yo, what I want people around me to just praise me. I want to just succeed in one small part of a society. It's meaningless. So the future generations, do not be daunted by how the past generations judge you. Do you know they had it easier? Do you know? The fact is, they had it easier internally, not externally. But the future generations have it easier externally, but not internally. That means mental instability has increased, actually. The idea is that, You need to find that greater purpose. Purpose gives meaning, and it also gives identity by positioning you in a role. Everything I do, all the archetypes throughout the day that I identify with, it is just this view that, yo man, I give a lecture and I go to sleep, and the next day I wake up, the only thing that's left out of that day is like the lecture or the things I, digitally recorded or wrote down or created physically, and the thing is, similarly, it's like I feel every day of one's life, it in some sense needs to be a sort of action, a sort of service to the realm, okay, that could be in some sense maintained. So the thing I was saying about the barista and the hot dog stand owner is that they're not just giving hot dogs and coffee out, and it's not like, oh man, I hate this job. No, no, no. You are serving part of the day. That means coffee baristas don't understand how many people they've given coffee to, and and those people have gone to work, okay, and they've managed to do, let's say, be more alert at work somehow, even though coffee brings down your energy. I've heard, like, at the end of the day, but at the same time, they have served the alertness of the species. That hot dog stand owner, has served the hunger of this, has served, like, you know, the contentment of the species to some degree. I mean, even same like, alertness as well, right? The whole point of it is that we were first surviving for ourselves. Okay, then people are like, okay, why just ourselves? We're going to survive for the tribe. Okay, then they're like, all right, we got to survive for the nation. Now we need to survive for the species, and in order to be able to do that, we need to realize there needs to be an additional layer. I find it so fascinating that there are so many companies around the world, and there are people in that company of different religions. There's a Christian, Muslim, and imagine there's there's an architecture firm, and there's a Christian architect, there's a Muslim architect, and there's, let's say, a Jewish architect. Okay, and they are all working for the greater good of that architecture firm where all of their vitality and income is based. Okay, and it's so funny that when they identify with an additional layer of a role, that means when they identify as architects, they get along. But if they identified with their specific personal beliefs, they'd suddenly be at conflict. You understand? So we as human beings need to understand, all right, 8.1 billion different people, on a personal level, we can't get along. It's impossible. You know? But in the view of a greater role, as stewards of the earth, as stewards of the species, and then as stewards of the species, as stewards of the earth, and then stewards of the universe. That's very advanced responsibility level, to care for what's happening in your universe and its quality. Not just caring for the quality of what's happening in your nation, or, or just your species. So my recommendation is, we're reaching that era, okay, where we're moving beyond nationalism. And it's thanks to really the internet. Really. That's a huge part of it. And humanity, all these beings that are different, we're all like different cells in a human body. If we can't find common ground, yeah, as nouns, then we must find common ground as verbs. Okay, we must unite in our actions, you know? And so the roles, it needs new roles. So for me, the way I'm kind of like even handling my own psyche is that, it wasn't like this at first, but I came to the conclusion that every human being is a member of my species. They can be rude to me, they can be nice to me, they could be whatever, but their existence is a unique part of the existence of the human species. I saw this video recently. I posted it in the community section of the YouTube channel. I saw, in some sense, this video by Princess Diana, okay? And she said something very beautiful and profound. She said that everyone needs more love. And she's like, if I can give someone love, like a child, love for 5 minutes, an hour, that's like worth it. Okay, and it's simply because people feel unloved because you don't feel how do I say it, like you're not, it's an absence of belonging. It's an absence of one's true identity. And it's very important, to love people even though their actions might make it that they don't deserve it. But that's the thing, we don't know if they deserve it or not, but we must love the species if we don't want to hate it. You need to care for on a species level. That's what I'm trying to say. Anyways, guys, thank you for listening. I'll end the talk here. In the name of God, the most benevolent, the most merciful, and the most advanced, in honor of the original unconditional moment that all conditional moments have arisen from and will return to, in honor of the world host and the system admin of this existential simulated system and world room. Thank you for listening. Rise, mankind, rise. Because now we must rise beyond nations and we must truly activate the potential of our species. We must care for the greatness of humanity. Why is there forgiveness? Why is there mercy? Because people can notice things and become better. They can notice things differently and become better. And the betterment of mankind, at least take it from one person who's dedicated his life to this, is of utmost importance. Thank you for listening. Have a good night. Bye.